importance of the seated poses is that they are set in a sequence for a particular reason. So in the Ashtanga practice, you have the primary series, the intermediate series, and the advanced series. The seated poses will fall into that category of primary series. There will always be a standing, and there will always be a finishing sequence that will be repeated throughout all the time. Each sequence, each primary series, advanced series, intermediate series, and so on, has particular functions. The seated poses that you're learning in the primary sequence are primarily to help you with your internal organs. That's what they're meant to do. So it's not just about flexibility and strength. It's to help your lungs, your liver, your kidneys all function better, so that when you move on to the other sequences, you're building block upon block. Keep in mind that not all the poses are qualified. Just because it's primary, it doesn't mean it's beginner. So again, you have to mind your level. They're very difficult poses even within the primary sequence. This is why you need someone to guide you through, to make sure that you're learning the proper way to control your ankle, knee, hip, sit, stand, breathe, all those things. It's good to practice on your own, but you always need a teacher to guide you. The other most difficult thing about the primary sequence is that you have a double-sided jump, especially in the very beginning, which that means you'll do a pose on the right leg, do your vinyasa, you're jumping back and forth, which is what Ashtanga is known for. Then you'll do the left side. This, over time, will help you build strength and build endurance. And that's one of the main focuses of the Ashtanga practice in general. And it really stands out within the primary sequence. So again, mind what you're doing. Pay attention. If something is bothering you, go slowly, find your breathing, and as always, find someone who can help guide you through a practice properly. Right? Enjoy the video.
Now we're on the floor. This officially begins the primary series. All right? When we begin, the first thing we do, as we come through, we're going to sit down and we're going to sit up straight. This is not necessarily recognized as a pose, because we'll do the first pose out of it. But this is your reminder that every pose you sit down on the floor, you need to sit up straight. It's very common for people to slouch back just in a very casual way before they take a pose. So this is your reminder. Every pose needs to be lifted. The same as Samastitihi, we're lifting from below the belly button. Right? The first pose we actually do is grabbing the big toes, with the two fingers, Paschimottanasana. We actually have 3 or 4 versions of this, but we'll only do 2. The other ones will fill in the blank. So what we want to do is we want to bend forward and touch the head. Actually grab your toe. That's it. Okay? Now as you can see, slightly rounded in the spine. This is a natural bend. A lot of times people are encouraged to try to flatten that out. Right? In a forward bend, it is the most common place for people to get hurt. And it's usually people who are already very flexible. And the reason is they hit this extension and then they keep extending, and they usually pull into their lower back. That's one of the more common injuries, if you will, when people are doing yoga, and it's from taking themselves too far. We want the head to hang, and we want this to be natural. In some cases, come up a bit, people will be like this. Again, this is okay. What we're looking for is the same as that beginning seated pose. Is she lifting from here and letting this hang? That is the most important thing. If the lift is not there, and she's just rounding and rounding, now she's rounding the opposite way. We are no longer going forward. Her body is actually moving away. So we want to lift the tummy, let the head hang down. This is the A version. If you're unable to get your head down, or you are unable to reach your toes, this will be the only version you do. If you need to bend the knees, then we want the knees to stay together. Every time the legs open, we lose strength. Remember, the emphasis is stability and lift. Every time this is apart, we're going to lose strength. So even if this is bent and she just goes down, we're still maintaining the lift in the body and the lift coming from the hips. Straight leg. If taking the toes is no problem, then we do the C version, which is to catch the hands all the way around. Again, taking 5 breaths, and then inhale, come up, and then exhale. That's Paschimottanasana. Purvattanasana. After forward bending, as we did in Paschimottanasana, it's customary to do the opposite. So, Purvattanasana, the hands will be taken back. Now, as you can notice, if we bring her feet together, her toes together, her heels don't come together. Right? All that matters is that we're pointing. In this case, we have a problem where the knee bones press against each other too much. So there's a slight bow here. What we want to do is keep the toes pointed, regardless of whether this is touching. Now, if she closes her heels, she rolls everything out. And this is the weaker position. So in her case, we're going to keep the toes and the heels apart and the toes down. Inhaling, she's going to lift up and press her toes to the floor. Okay? And then her head looks back and eyes go back. We'll take 5 breaths here, and then we'll come down. It's very common to want to look at the nose in terms of where you look at in this pose. If this is okay for you, this is fine. Otherwise, you just look back. Allow your throat to open. Allow your feet to press. Once the body feels open, if you want to adjust the eyes, then you adjust the eyes. We just need the gaze to be focused somewhere. That's what a dristi is when we're talking in the yoga terms, where you're looking. Each pose, your eyes should be on a fixed point. In this case, we can allow it to be back or down to the tip of the nose. This is Purvattanasana. Ardha Baddha Padma Paschimottanasana. This is one of the more difficult poses for beginners to do. The first thing we want to do is we want to bring the right foot up into half lotus. So it's going to match our standing poses that we did earlier. Now, if we had trouble in the standing pose, we would do the exact same thing. We would just reach 2 hands forward, and that would be that. Then you just breathe. As you're feeling the pose gets a bit softer, you can take the head down. Ideally, we want the hand to come back and catch. Again, if we have to choose between going forward and making the catch, we can do it in 2 bits. We can just sit up and take 5 breaths here, and then release and go forward for 5 breaths. The general rule for a beginner is, as it is okay. We're not trying to get it to be anywhere. You are what you are, and that's where we start. We have to start from only that position. We can't make you do anything that won't fit. Now, when we take the half lotus, this may be too difficult for you. All right, take out. One of the easier ways to work with the half lotus is you're going to bend the knee and you're going to hold your elbow up. Then you're going to take and you're going to turn your toes. All right? So all your toes are facing you. We want to roll the knee back. You see how we're rolling this hip all the way back and the heel becomes very close? That's all we're doing. See, we're rocking the hip in, rocking the hip out. That's it. It may stop here. Let's say this is about as far as she can go. When she brings the foot in, we want her to sit up straight. And now she rolls on top of the hip. The 2 points that are moving are the toes and the hip. The knee should already be secure. Okay? If there's pain in the knee, then there has to be a reevaluation of what's happening in the foot and what's happening in the hip. But that can only be assessed person by person, case by case. In a general rule, roll the hip back, turn the toes in. Roll the hip back, turn the toes in. Then sit up. That's Ardha Baddha Padma, Paschimottanasana. Trianga Mukha Ekapada Paschimottanasana. The right foot, as it came in earlier, now we do the opposite. So the foot goes out. The distance here is just about the size of your fist. Some people will be in here, but this is not necessary. Just about a fist this apart. The back foot, the heel is located on the outside of the hip. Right? So we don't want to be sitting on the heel. As before, the first thing we need to do is sit up. Right? Then we exhale and we go forward. A lot of times, there will be a big lean. If you're finding that the pose leans too much, then what we do is we bring this leg much wider. Again, we're trying to encourage the hip to go back and the torso to go forward, and not necessarily flat. Again, you see how we have this nice long curving action from the top of her head all the way down to her tailbone. Right? And then inhale, head up, and then exhale. Okay? If this is too much for you, in some cases, the toe won't point. This is when you really need to make sure the foot is almost too wide. We're almost into another pose. But it's to emphasize that this back foot needs to be flat. So that might be one of the biggest obstacles. A lot of people who run inside their ankle, it doesn't want to point. It likes to stay with a bit of a flexion. So if the leg comes out a bit wider, that's okay. Do not worry about going forward. You just keep sitting and pressing and sitting and pressing. As that starts to change, you can slowly bring your way in. Okay? So in this particular asana, the back foot has a lot to say on how the pose is taken. Right? Trianga Mukha Ekapada Paschimottanasana. Janu Shirshasana. We have 3 Janu Shirshasanas. A, B, and C. The A pose, the foot comes right up against the thigh. Okay? Now, Janu means knee, and Shirshasana means head. So it's head to knee pose. Again, it's very common for people to want to keep their head off the, reach forward, to keep their head up. This is a very common position. But in this pose, it's in the name. Head to knee. So if you get the urge to want to lift up, just remember it's head to knee pose. Right? This foot stays not quite 90 degrees, but just out to the side. That's the A version. You want to feel like you're stepping on a pedal. Come up. Right? So this foot is active. This foot is not passive. Again, keeping this foot active creates the lift up through the body. Okay? So this is lifting, this is falling forward. This is the A version. The B version, the foot will stay exactly the same, and now she's going to lift up and sit on top of the heel. Okay? Hold that up and sit up straight. So her heel, she's sitting right on her heel. A lot of times, people will point their toes all the way back. Point your foot all the way back. Other way. Yeah. Okay? If you have no choice, then you have no choice. But this is not the correct position for the pose. As much as possible, we want the foot to follow the A position. Right? And then sit on top. And then the knee will adjust in slightly. Right? That's Janu Shirshasana B. Come out. Janu Shirshasana C. So to get into the pose, if initially it's too hard, what we do is we start with the baby toe and we press it into the floor. So we're pressing the baby toe into the floor and the heel into the leg. Now, if she puts her hands behind her and picks her hips up, she can rotate all the way across her toes. Lift up and come across. Keep your heel up. That's it. Okay? All right. And you notice the knee comes in. So now we want the knee in at almost 45 degrees. If you find this difficult, then this is where you stay. This will be the pose. If you're feeling like there's too much pressure on your knee, then you keep the weight pressing this way, and you use your hip to hold your leg up. Over time, as this position feels better, the leg should start to drop. Right? And then, as always, it'll be head to knee. Right? Normally, you wouldn't do this pose with anybody who has very, very, very bad knees, or anybody who's, say, in their 70s or 80s. You would not start. This would be something that takes quite a long time to develop. So there's no rush in the pose. You always make sure that you're sitting up straight and breathing is as smooth and as free as possible. Right? Those are the Janu Shirshasana, A, B, and C.